I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with p.ridgway. He is a consultant in the shipping industry where he provides IT and service backed solutions to global companies who ship bulk cargo around the world. Now, I've known Philip since high school, and I want to find out how his journey has been thus far. But I also noticed of Philip that he has a sense of positivity in his life, and I want to see what is the root of that positivity and how it is affecting his work. Join me in my conversation with Philip Ridgway. I'm Brian V, and this is Why We Work. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Philip Ridgway. Good morning, young man.
Good morning. Good to see you
I,
again, Brian.
I just said, because you told me he's only 6, because usually I got people in North America, so it's quite opposite, and it's pretty early here, but I said, man, you're looking pretty fresh for 6, and you're like, yeah, I was up at 4. So good on you. You
Yeah,
got the reading in, you got the meditating in, you got your run in.
yeah.
Philip, it's nice speaking with you. And I'm glad you're on a path that seems to be positive. Can you give us a little rundown? I did a brief introduction to us before we started recording. Um, could you give us a brief introduction of yourself and just get us up to speed with you?
Yeah. So originally from Halifax, Nova Scotia, where you're from,
Oh, come on. You're
Canada.
not originally from Halifax. Don't do that.
Sorry, it's true. It's true. Lower Sackville,
Thank you.
Cardigan.
Come on, man. You're originally from Lower Sackville. Don't get it confused with New Brunswick either.
I forgot about that actually. Yeah, because
Come
no one ever
on,
asked.
man. We're originally from Sackville. Boy, I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
you
true.
may not have been, so I didn't want to push it too much, but
Yeah,
I got you.
yeah,
Sackville. Proud.
yeah. So born and raised there, and then the abbreviated version is I left Canada in 2006 originally, moved to Qatar for approximately 7, 8 years. Came in and out of the Middle East, just tried going back home, opened up a couple of businesses, and then my most recent stint back in the Middle East in Dubai now, UAE, since 2017 and been here since with my amazing wife from the Philippines and 2 little girls who are 3 and 4, hitting 4 and 5. So that's the very short version.
That is a good version. Take us back, Philip, because I know you and I were talking a moment ago, and I reminded you of when the last time I saw you, which would have been just prior to you going to Qatar, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What was your first job, Philip? As a teenager, growing up in Sacktown, what is something that got you out of the house, and what did you do to make a dollar?
Very first job was newspapers. So
So
when
many
that
people.
existed, which was quite early, and then Sunday flyers, you may recall those. So used to deliver those. That was prior to 16, the legal age, because you were allowed to do those
Mhm.
things. And then when I turned legal at 16, I worked at Wilson's Gas Stop in Sackville, on Sackville Drive when it first opened, if you may recall.
Why did you go start the newspaper route?
Parents just instilling discipline, hard work. You don't get what you work for, just all that stuff. So it was a byproduct of just good parenting.
And then into
Yeah.
Wilson's. How long did that bring you? Is that up until high school that you're working with Wilson's gas
Wilson's was
station?
high school, yeah. And then high school into university year one, I then shifted over to Moe's Menswear in Sunnyside Mall, which I worked for, oh, it's, wow,
Almost 10 years then.
for, yeah, it was a long time. Ended up being the assistant manager there at that age, which was really, really cool because back then Tommy Hilfiger and Gant and Chaps, all that was huge, right? So I was getting all the new stuff and feeding my ego unknowingly, all that stuff. So yeah.
So in high school, back it up a little bit. What were you thinking for your career, or were you thinking that seriously? What about school? What was going on in your mind then?
I wasn't really because I was pretty much, I'm guessing, like a lot of people, just unguided, not really kind of knowing where I'm going. I had one role model who worked at Investors Group, so I probably unconsciously wanted to get into finance, to the investment world because that's what success looked like to me. So I think I wanted to model that. But I didn't really have true passion or driven result for that, if you will.
So did you go off into university? I thought that what did you do after high school?
St. Mary's
Yeah, I
and
thought it was St.
BCom,
Mary's.
and major in finance. And again, that's probably because, in hindsight, of this role model that I framed as successful. So I wanted to become without actually having self-awareness, and I figured out what you like. So yeah, that's kind of what I did.
So
And then
as
I,
go ahead, yeah.
yeah, and then I did move into, for 1 year, Freedom 55 London Life, and I did do that for a year. I think like a lot of people did, but you realize quickly that 100% commission is no joke. It's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, there you go.
You'll know Steve Foote and I both went for that
Mm,
job, and I recall he
right.
went with it for a little bit, and I had the interview, and I could just, no offense to Freedom 55, but it's just a grind. It's a grinding type of
It's a
position
real
where
grind.
100% commission, and it was one of my first major interviews, and I can just see the interviewer's head, and I find this is true for any interview that I've had since. Their head was getting smaller to me, so I felt I wasn't as interested in the position, but kudos to you for lasting a year, because it's tough, because what I've right off the bat, I was like, you mean I have to ask all my family,
I
friends,
know.
and like that
Awkward.
was the very awkward to do that. I've learned since that there's a lot of jobs like that. If if you have something you want
Yeah.
to promote, you will tell people. But right out of college or university, and starting a
Yeah.
job like that, I wasn't comfortable doing it, and I felt it was too much
No.
of a grind.
But you're also young and inexperienced. I lacked confidence back then.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall Jonathan Lewis from high school. I mean,
Yes.
he'd be good for a podcast, FYI. But um, he's he's one of the rare individuals who has done quite well for himself. But if you were to speak to him at a deeper level, there is a deeper why as to why that was, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a grind. Mad respect to whoever does that.
So were you at Moe's on and off throughout this time? Is that how that worked from high school in through university?
Yeah, so I was there throughout university, and then when I left or finished university, sorry,
Yep.
that's when I left Moe's and then had my first career job, and I had high aspirations, right, as we all do. So that's where it was.
When did the itch start to think about moving abroad? How did that
Well,
come
that's an
about?
interesting story in itself. So I had met someone from Newfoundland, and we got married, and she got a job over at the College of North Atlantic out of Newfoundland,
Mm-hmm.
and they landed a big contract with the Qatari government, and
Okay.
she got a job there. So then I actually followed her. So it wasn't really an itch. At that point in time, I had left the investment world, and
Yep.
I was a year and a half in what's called the freight forwarding world, which is international shipping of containers. So I was young, didn't know much, and I thought it'd be cool to get international experience, and why not go where it's safer, where she's got a job already. So I
Yep.
just followed her.
Off her coattails. That's pretty good. Did you
Yeah.
find that was a difficult, because even getting into your position now as a consultant, was that a difficult transition from not having the experience in freight and then jumping into a position like that? Was that hard mentally to learn the ins and the outs of the game?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I've always been the kind of person who I'm very hungry for knowledge and learning. So I would say no from the learning aspect, but very difficult from the cultural aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you may know, back then we were very much in a bubble in Nova Scotia. There wasn't a lot of different cultures around us. So I
Mm-hmm.
left
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
The news was predominantly American news. It's all we had watched. And I had one paradigm. I then moved to Qatar and met, I mean, you name the nationality, Europeans,
Yeah.
Asians from all areas. Language barriers was a massive problem for me. I had to learn a new language called broken English, just to slow things down.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that was quite difficult, which took, I would say, a good year or two, if frankly, it could have even been longer.
So you mentioned that you had left Qatar and started different businesses. How did that transition go, or what happened to end your career in Qatar and to start something
Yeah.
new?
Well, the first one was 2008. So I worked for a company in Qatar called Geodis Wilson, and they never had an office or presence in the east coast of Canada. So I actually approached them and said, if I go back and open up my own office, can I use you guys as the global network?
Hmm.
And they agreed. So we did that, but I was getting into a business for money, not for what I loved and did, just completely not in the right mind frame. So we broke even in the end, but then I dissolved it after I got an opportunity to move back to Qatar. Then 2 years later,
Phil, could you see, like, you're making a point, a side point, that it wasn't something that you loved, but in that proposal to bring the company to
yeah,
Canada, could you sense that? Like, thinking of listeners, where they're in a job that they're doing something they may not love, but there may have been a sense for you that this is not really what I want to do, but I got to pay the bills, I got to do this. What I really liked is something else. Did you have that sense, or did that come later on?
I think I've always had that innate sense. However, the drive of doing it to impress others exceeded that voice,
Yeah.
meaning that I was more excited about bragging to others and friends that I had the business at a very young age. Look at me, and look how well I've done. Instead of this is actually what I love, what I want to do, and make a difference behind it. Um, and this has all been obviously in reflection
Yep.
years later,
Yep.
but the innate sense was always there. Yeah, because I recall the days in the business where I should have been in passionate growth mode. I was just extremely unhappy.
Yeah.
And it was difficult to communicate to others because, like everyone else said, but you own a business.
Well,
I'm
you're
like,
doing
yeah,
so
but
great. Wow, good for
yeah,
you.
yeah. It was all just surface blah blah, right?
Facade.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
How long
yeah.
did this last, from 2008?
2 years,
2 years.
spot on.
And
Yeah.
then what was, before you made the other transition, were you planning it in advance, or did it just end? You just stopped? How did you plan, or did you plan well?
Yeah, so I reached out to my network again that I had made already in Qatar, and said, look, if opportunities come up, I'd be interested in coming back, and call it fate, call it the universe, or however it suits you. Um, I had never been on the client side at this point. I have only been on the service provider side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And a smelter, which makes aluminum or aluminium for the rest of the world, opened up in Qatar,
Yeah.
and they needed a head of shipping. And I had made contacts from the old days. One thing led to another. That it was a very lucrative job that I look back on and I gained incredible experience on. So it manufactured a product which I was part of a plant which did that, and it was just invaluable what I've learned there professionally and personally. So yeah,
In aside, like, the reason why I do this podcast is because the skills and talents people have. Can you comment, even from this short period of time of, say, 4 years, of all the
yeah.
things you learned coming from, I don't know, did you spend time in Newfoundland?
Yeah, well, I didn't live, but I was there a lot. Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
so
In and out.
coming from the East Coast, even as far East Coast as Newfoundland, and then finding yourself on the other side of the world, learning about something that you had no idea prior to that. Can you
Yeah,
comment on the idea of just learning, just how valuable it is to keep on learning, especially, and not to be afraid, but as you, I
yeah,
think, and we'll talk about in a little bit, you have a desire and a heart to keep learning, even, we're
yeah,
getting up there.
yeah. So what I've learned, I didn't know this until I started reading. So everything that I am now is built by books. There's no question about it. I'm an avid reader. It gives you perspective, and for me, it gives me confidence because if you read these books, um, you know that you're not alone. It's almost like this collective energy which you can tap into. And I've learned that by learning, you're progressing, and when you're progressing, that means happiness, and it's where confidence is built. So once you can learn that there is no failure. The only failure that I've learned is if you don't get back up.
Hmm.
And we all have them, but most just don't speak about it.
Yeah.
So once I learned that, it just became irrelevant to not try and not ask questions and learn.
How long did you stay with this? I know we're approaching a big benchmark for you in 2015, but how long did you stay with this company from 2010?
3 years at the smelter.
3 years.
No, sorry, 5 years. Five, sorry, yeah, five.
So all the way to 2015.
Yeah,
So I know, as you had mentioned to me, and I kind of wanted to not know fully what happened, but you said this was a big turning point for you, and kind of some people say the proverbial rock bottom sort of time. So are you able to divulge what it was that kind of changed your perspective and your new course on life?
yeah, of course. So my current wife and I, left Qatar just because we had enough of the Middle East. So I thought.
Yeah.
Again, when you're unguided, you just run to numb things in your life. But when we came back, we invested in the rights of a franchise called Freshie.
So
I don't know if you've heard of
sorry,
that.
Phil. The idea of leaving Qatar had nothing to do with Qatar, had nothing, you were just ready for a fresh new start, trying something different.
Yeah. So at that point, we accumulated quite a bit of savings,
Yeah.
and I wanted to try to own a business again. But again, I made the mistake twice that I did it for thinking that I would get rich in money and not with the love and passion. So we invested in the rights for 5 franchise locations exclusively in Newfoundland and New Brunswick for Freshie, it's called. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's
What is that company?
so it's fresh, but 2 eyes on the end. And it's a Canadian franchise, and they predominantly are into gluten-free salads, bowls, healthy, uh, very much like trend items,
So a
which the
family
world,
restaurant sort of deal, but with
yeah, like
healthy
it,
food.
it's called fast casual because
Okay. Yeah.
it's fresh, but it's quick.
Yeah.
Um, it's basically I would call it a healthier enhancement of the Subway.
Yeah.
But obviously with that comes a premium, right?
Hmm.
So we had bought that and put literally all of our savings into it,
How,
thinking that it would go. Yeah.
knowing that we're going to be at a cliffhanger of a story. It won't be a cliffhanger, but you're going to tell us what happened. How was the process? And I know you have a different perspective now of pushing all of your chips in. Were you both like, just, this is going to be the best? Was there even
Mm.
some of that reluctancy in there? How did that, because that's, you spent 5 years in Qatar making some money, saving some money, going back, thinking, talking about it, probably talking to some mentors or people, and everyone's like, oh, yes, this is going to be great. And then you're like, psh. How
Yeah.
was that process for you? Because people do it
Yeah.
today, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting question because I've thought back on those moments a lot. The answer now is unequivocally different than how I felt then. So how I felt then, I was so entrapped and engulfed in ego and arrogance
Yeah.
that I thought there is absolutely no way this is not going to work because I have always succeeded by either force or aggression or just all the wrong ineffective energies. So I thought, how would this be any different? So when I went all chips in, there was absolutely in my mind then,
Yeah.
and I really thought that was reality.
Yeah.
There was no other option. So now, in reflection, I've had multiple chats with my late wife and said, How did we do that? Why didn't we go like half of our savings
Hmm.
or 25% or whatever it was, right? But that only comes through great pain and struggle when you get on the other side, right?
Hmm.
Which is now in my greatest gift, is how I've learned, but
Yeah.
that hasn't come with a lot of work.
So how
Yeah,
long before pushing the chips in did you realize that you just didn't have the cards to continue?
month or two. Yeah, it was scary because we had injected 3 major substantial shareholder loans And I recall looking at my wife. It's like yesterday, and I get kind of emotional even speaking about it.
Yeah.
We're sitting in the restaurant, and I wrote our last shareholder loan, which worthy shareholders. And I said to her, "This is it. If this doesn't last, I don't know." And at that point, even bankruptcy was not an option, because how I used to frame bankruptcy was failure. But then after I spoke to my chartered accountant, who is hired to be very factual and unemotional, thank God, I recall him saying to me, "You have no other choice. It's fine. A lot of people do this."
Mm.
And it was 200 grand in total approximately, right? And he goes, "This is nothing. Like the banks don't even care. Like they have way bigger fish." But in my mind, it was like life altering. My world was over.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, it was 200 grand. It's not a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, right? So, yeah,
Did you have, because I mean, you're talking 5 years ago, so minus 5 years off your age, still young, still not young now, but the point is, did you think, was there somewhere in your head, even though you have a different perspective on life now, that you're young, even if it fails, I can bounce back, even though you were sure it was going to work? Did you think,
yeah,
even if this fails, I'm going to be all right because I can still work? I can go back to Qatar. I can go do this. I can do that. Did you have any of that insight to think, even if it fails? Because you have to think there's a possibility.
yeah. So, paradoxically, yes, and that was my problem. I always had that. No, but it was,
Yeah.
and that is because I used to look around and not everybody had that option. I always had this tax-free Middle East haven that I could always go back to and recoup.
The golden ticket.
So therefore, exactly, and therefore I was never fully invested in
Yeah.
the that I was should have been committed to.
Yeah.
So paradoxically, that was like I would say handcuffs on me, if you will.
Have you experienced, in meeting some, expats in the places you've been, other people in similar situations where, I'm in Korea and I come across this all the time, people who save money and they say they're going to go back to Canada, go to the United States, and life kind of slaps them and it's not as easy as they thought. And they sold their house here, they're buying a house there, and it fails and they're just losing money, fist over
Yeah,
fist.
yeah, yeah. So what's interesting about that is, and I forget the time frames. When this all happened, I was silent for a period of time, and I think it was a year or two for sake of conversation, because I was ashamed. But I've learned that shame can only reside in secrecy, silence, and judgment. So I was concerned that I would be judged, and I wouldn't be liked. But then when I started reading, I realized, man, I'm amongst some pretty great company. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who we put on these pedestals today have either had almost bankruptcy or have gone bankrupt. And then I started speaking about it. Even locally in Halifax,
Yep.
I know predominant business owners who have failed more times than they have succeeded. And then I was like, I think I'm on to this something here. Actually, like, I'm glad I went bankrupt.
Right. Yeah.
So it became this journey of enlightenment, if you will, and realizing that that was supposed to happen. And my pain now is really materialized into my greatest gift. And that's just not all gooey
Yeah.
puffiness. It's just been self-realization of that.
And
So
staying
yeah,
silent wasn't helping you.
not at all. It was just crippling me, in fact, moving me into a very dark place, which is scary.
Yeah. Talking
Yeah.
to yourself, telling you how bad you are and how
Oh
you're
my
no
God.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
from 2015, how long did it take for you to start to see the light, to start to see that you can get out of this?
Well, so in April of 2016, I moved back. No, I'm mixing that. I apologize.
No
April of
worries.
2015, 1-5, I moved back to recoup, and I was going to do what I always did: come back here, numb myself in alcohol, because that was my choice.
Hmm.
I always find people have women, drugs, or alcohol, and they choose one to escape the thoughts in their head. Mine was
Or all of
alcohol.
them. Yep.
Yeah, or all of them, exactly. mine was always alcohol because I could control it and I could numb my pain.
Mm-hmm,
What I didn't
mm-hmm,
realize until I read more that I was numbing my own happiness. And it got to a point where we got pregnant with our first girl, a daughter in May of 15, and the alcohol wasn't working anymore. And I was like, this is weird, strange. This always works.
mm-hmm.
And then I started reading for the first time in my life in October of 2015. And that's when I began to wake up, if you will. And I've hundreds and hundreds of books now, podcasts, just feeding my mind with optimism and just
Yep.
cut off all news 4 years ago. People think that I'm nuts, but they're like, yeah, but you have to watch the news. Why? It's not offering me anything except for fear and it's just, yeah, that's kind of what's happened.
It's funny with news, and not to get off on a tangent, but like people always pit one news outlet for another, but it's actually owned by the same people. So it's
100%.
like
That's
it's
what I've
just
learned.
so bizarre. And news is like, if you can find something out is fine, but the news
Yeah,
that's reported on 99% of the time now, like news is lots of news stories are missed because people have an agenda, and that agenda
yeah,
is not uplifting, it's not positive. Like that's when you
yeah,
see some positive news reports, and it brings a little thing to your heart, or a tear to your eye, and you're like, oh, look at that, something going. But they don't report on that most of the time, and that's why I think you're onto something of not watching the news, and just feed your
yeah,
mind with some things that are good for you, positive, uplifting stories of people who have overcome adversity. Those are all
yeah,
good for us, and it's well worth the time. It's something, I mean, I think you're onto something. So from
yeah.
2016, is it the same position you're in now, or did you switch over to a different job from your
No,
consultant?
so then I like again it comes across very sporadic because it is because I was just still running, trying to figure out life. And I've also learned that when you keep yourself busy, you can get out of the inner narrative of your voice, and that can be quite self-destructive if unmanaged or if unaware.
Yeah.
So I left 2016, came home, worked for a company there locally in Halifax.
Yep.
And then I came back in 2017. That's where I've been since.
So how is your, like, just thinking of family, how's your wife for coming and going? How's that? Is it been helpful? Is it a little harmful? Do you warn people about that? Do you say, it's just part of your journey? And because I know for myself, being married
Yeah,
to a South Korean lady, that we've gone back and forth to Canada maybe 4 times or so. And it's really strenuous on the marriage, because from my wife's perspective, my dear wife's perspective, she just wants a home. And it wouldn't be so bad if it was here or there. It's just the idea of settling. And just looking at your chronology, you've been all over the place for a good couple of decades here. So how is
yeah,
that, or how do you direct people to let them know, and how what you're doing, the way you're thinking now, has given you a broader perspective? Maybe it's, yeah, travel is good, that is all wonderful, or you're finally settling down and you have a more concrete plan.
yeah. Well, my wife is the complete opposite of me. Is the she's quite zen, and as most of the Asian culture, they're subservient in nature just because how they were raised, and I have to be constantly aware of that because a person with my kind of personality can just bulldoze and be unaware
Take advantage
that,
of the situation. Yeah.
and that is the constant awareness that we're trying to bring into our marriage because she's been taught her whole life, I don't really have a voice, and I'm like, no, no, you do have a voice, and then I can then steamroll. I can be quite
Hmm.
aggressive. So in there lies growth. So we actually speak about that. So to
That's
answer the
insightful,
question,
Phil. That's really good. Yeah, I want you to answer the question, but I never even thought of being, both you and I are married to people from Asia. But I think there is even an undercurrent with women in general, but not to,
yeah,
my mom was a single mom, worked really hard all of her life, that there's
yeah,
these general cultural awarenesses, acceptances that happen, and men, I think, have a greater responsibility to understand where our wives are coming from and appreciate the differences, value them, and at the same time not steamroll them because we know we could
And do
and do
because
and do.
well,
Yeah.
and I always liken it to balance. Life is about balance and being in a present state. Now, often you go on either side of that. You'll be
Hmm.
out of balance in the aggressive state, or you'll be lower energies, depressed, right?
Yeah. And
And
passive and
whatever,
I don't care.
yeah. So whatever energy state you're in, you'll just do it. And I know immediately now. And it just comes from practice. Now I'll calm down.
Yeah.
I'll try to get more present, and then I will always go to her and say, you know what, I did it again. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I did it again. Can we unravel that and unpack as to why that was, and then come to a root cause? And just speaking about it is the key. Most people don't speak about it.
Yeah.
They put it under a rug, it collects energy, and then it comes out in other forms,
Yeah.
which has nothing to do with why that's actually happening, but it comes back to this um, levels that you should be discussing in those moments.
So how is
So
she
yeah,
with the moving back and forth?
yeah. So because of her cultural upbringing, she was okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm
Okay,
fine
here
with
we
it,
go.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But now that we are here, the last 3 years, I have, and I know it's not a coincidence, ended up in a position and part of something which is much larger than myself. And I completely understand how blessed I am in being in that spot, because most don't have that luxury. You either create something which is bigger, or you're part of something. So I found that, and we're for the first time in our lives settled, and I can feel it internally. So
Mm-hmm.
she's like, don't want to go back for a while.
And you're
Good.
in Dubai. I don't think we mentioned that. You're in Dubai, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
How is that as a place for people? I didn't know much about Dubai. I mean, certainly not at a high school, but coming here, as you know, in Korea, you hear more about it. A lot of expats jump over there and start work there. How are you finding life in Dubai?
Everything that you need is here in terms of logistics, supply chain, conveniences. All of that is here. There's, in terms of like-minded people, associations,
Is it like
think
60
groups.
40? 60% foreigners there? I thought I read somewhere. There's a lot of expats of internet. It's very
It's even
international.
more.
But
Yeah,
even
because
more.
yeah, like your most population would be Indians and then Filipinos.
Yep.
Locals would be the least, and then you get a mix of Europeans, Americans, Canadians.
It's a very new area too, right? In the city, it's very well mapped out and
Yeah, yeah,
innovationable. It's they're
yeah,
doing very well for themselves, but expensive, from what I hear. It's quite expensive.
extreme.
So
Yeah,
where you are now, Phil, in your job as a consultant for shipping in this shipping industry, what is it you do each day? What is part of your work?
yeah. So my main remit, and it's kind of funny because I pushed against this. I'm responsible for new business all day, every day.
Yeah.
Well, because left sales way back in 2006, because something about it always felt plastic and false. This like it's a very negative label in general. And I went over to operations. So when I came to this job, they do it very differently. It's more about service.
Yep.
It's more about sharing and connecting first, and all of that will then happen. It's very much in line with who I am.
Hmm.
So I don't even like saying that I'm in sales. I say I'm on the commercial team, because as soon as I say sales, people have their own labels and their
Yeah.
preconditioned thoughts as to what that is.
Hmm.
So that's my job all day, every day, is to bring in new customers. I used to travel the world to be in front of customers, but then COVID happened. So we've been forced to do things over Zoom or Teams. So I spend a lot of time right here on this.
What is difficult about your job, Phil? Whether it's the shipping
The
part of it or being, trying to attract new customers.
the most difficult is, I break it down to two things: effectively communicating the message from their lens,
Hmm.
That's very difficult. And two, in that same vein, changing the paradigm of doing something different than what is being done now. Because we're going in to inject platforms to
Hmm.
change how they're working. And that's very difficult to ask companies because it's a big change. And people don't like change unless they understand why.
Thinking it's interesting, because we come from the same cloth, same area, knowing that, in 2006 or 2005, you were at Moe's, and now you're working internationally with a pretty big company doing very well. What is the satisfaction that you get out of this position, or even just living where you are, or your new mindset on how you're living?
Uh, so this organization is around for 20 years and they are reshaping and changing the industry for the better. They're making it more transparent, more compliant. They're bringing in platforms that it never existed. So
Hmm.
what I love the most is we have such a great offering to actually just improve people's lives. And I love people. So it's not about what we do, it's just about serving people and helping them. And as soon as that light turns on with effective messaging or building trust and connection, it excites the crap out of me every day because
So
it takes a while.
I know that a lot of people don't understand shipping, but what would a typical customer require of your company?
Oh, that's a big question. Um, a lot of what we do is we remove the administrative burden
Hmm.
of documentation that they have today.
Hmm.
We move it from analog into digital and feed that back to them
Hmm.
with IT platforms in a digital format.
And what will their company also require in terms of shipping? So what is a typical, do they bring cargo to you, or you pick their cargo up and then you ship it
No,
wherever? How does
so
that work?
so we reside in the middle of the industry. So
Okay.
we are a data curation company, which
Okay.
we have evolved into. So we sit on a lot of the data transactions of the industry.
Hmm.
We feed that through data factories and then feed that information back to them, which makes them more empowered and gives them both their own benchmarks plus the industry benchmarks.
Understanding that about what your company does, what is something else that you think either people don't understand about what you do in your position, or you yourself with your new perspective on life, that you would like
Yeah.
people to understand so that they can have a better appreciation of you or your company?
We need to do a lot more work in building trust and communicating why we exist.
Hmm.
So what I mean is I sat in a meeting 2 weeks ago with a very, very large player in the industry, and they were asking questions about who we are, who owns us, what happens if you go public,
Hmm.
what happens. Because when we are asking for a company's data, that is their asset.
Yeah.
And it's so precious because it's, as you know, it's more precious than oil and gas now. It's all about data and information, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So we need to build this trust and communication as to why we are doing what we are doing. And we're in this for legacy to transform an industry, not for just profit and money. So that is our biggest unlock that we need to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a common denominator with most companies, trusting one another. Philip,
100%.
how many hours are you working? How busy are you in your work? Because it leads me to my next question.
Oh, it can be so. We serve the world, so I need to consider time zones. It can be anywhere from, it could be a quiet day,
Yeah.
4 hours, which I haven't seen for a while, but
Yeah.
8, 9 hours.
How are you staying productive? And maybe this is where you might want to talk to about, you were doing, and part of this is, from your 2015 change and coming over
Yeah.
in this year, a new change with your 75 hard day. Is that what is challenge that you're doing? How do you stay productive? What's keeping you going?
Yeah. So, it's the inner narrative. You need to constantly remind yourself why you're doing what you're doing and just inspiring yourself as to why that is. But also, what I've learned is I never worked out in my life until a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was never it fit. Again, built by books. When I read these books by various authors, all of them exercised, and I'm like, that must be something. I didn't want to because
Hmm.
it's shitty. I mean, it's
Hmm.
not fun running and all that until you go past a certain point.
Yeah.
But the more that you are exercising, the more energy you have, the more balanced you are, because you exert that energy, which could be internally, you always come back to your balance. So that and just pure self-awareness all day, every day, just trying to always observe why you're doing what you're doing, just leads to great productivity, I find.
So this helps you stay productive. What about this 75 challenge? Are you done that yet? I think I saw your post
Tomorrow,
recently. You have a couple of days, a day left.
yeah, tomorrow is I crossed that finish line, which I'm pumped.
Where did you receive this from? Is this something you made up on your own? What is this 75 hard day challenge?
I saw it first from a friend of mine. He posted it on Facebook that he
Hmm.
was doing it. He's a guy I look up to. So I looked at it and I'm like, and I knew it was a mental toughness program.
Hmm.
And to follow all those rules is no joke. And I was a bit nervous getting into it because I was like, because if I commit, I commit. There's no excuses, right?
What is the basis of it? What is required of you each day?
So no alcohol for 75 days, no cheat meals. You've got to eat clean, whatever clean is
No
for you.
what
You would
meals? What was it? No what meals?
no cheat meals. Like so, like no treats, no cheat
Snacks and
meals,
stuff.
nothing. Yeah. Two workouts a day,
Mhm.
45 minutes each. One has to
Okay.
be outdoors, which is easy here, but if you're in Canada, that's hard because it's
Yeah.
cold.
Yeah.
1 gallon of water, 10 pages of a self-development book a day, and one progress picture. So
Press picture on social media or just for yourself?
just yourself. I
Yeah.
like uh, have bought the app, so I put it in the app, right?
Yeah.
But the idea behind it is we as humans will always want to take the path to least resistance and convenience.
Hmm.
But I've learned that taking that path resides or promotes no growth or progress. So it
Hmm.
goes back to what we had spoke about originally.
Yeah.
Doing hard things is pain and struggle, and that's where all your growth comes from in everything in life.
That's a good
So doing
challenge.
this is unlock that. Yeah, I
That is a
love
good
it.
challenge. What is your goal? What is your plan after tomorrow?
I'm going to have a break, but then February 1, I'm going to do phase one because there's an evolution of it, which
Okay.
is all those rules plus a bit more, but it's only for a month. So yeah, there's always a next level, right?
Yeah.
You got to push.
So there is an app. There is an app for this. This is its own
Yeah,
programming. Okay. Very good.
yeah.
And what is the proper name for it?
75 Hard by
75
Andy
hard.
Frisella. Uh,
Okay.
um, yeah, just looking them up on.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds like a challenge, and it's interesting, and I would like to incorporate it in my own workout, and I challenge other people to do so as well, because especially it's so well balanced, right? As you said, it's a mental challenge too. It's not just a physical; it's just touching on
No, what
all aspects.
actually it is that it is a mental toughness. Everyone sees the you lose
Physical
weight,
part,
and that's
yeah.
all cool. But it's the internal, it's not the external. There's birds going by. I apologize, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's
What
getting
is
lighter here.
something, Phil? Maybe it's these sorts of tools with apps and exercise, but what is something that helps you stay productive in your work? Helps you work efficiently?
Right. So it's just I've learned that the work that you do in private is what you'll get in the public by results and things actually happening. So for me, every single morning at 4 a.m. is not about anything except for
What time are you going to bed to be waking up at 4 a.m.?
8.
That
I know
good. No,
it's
no,
not a
it's
very
no, but it's good. You get your work done. You're in by 8 and you're up by 4. It's something, it
yeah,
is something. But there's wisdom in that too. Like, don't be a fool and try to go to bed at 12 and wake up at 4. You're never going
no,
to do it. You're never going to do that. So
no.
you're going to suffer for it, but uh, I mean, what you're doing is it's good advice, and all of these things help people progress. And I hope there's listeners that say, well, man, I've been sitting on the couch. I eat snacks all the day. There's no, it's not what did you call it? A cheat snack or something? It's not a cheat snack.
Yeah.
It's just something I do all the time, or I hardly ever exercise, or I don't get up early at all. I'm always pressing the alarm, or I just wake up when I feel like it. And any sort of notch out of those sorts of bad habits, which
Yes.
I hope people listen to from you, is just going to help you, right? It's no one's going to help. I mean, what we've learned over 40 years, Phil, is ain't no one going to help us.
No, no.
You're only gonna help yourself.
Yeah.
How do you, Phil, separate yourself from your work? So making those life work choices, figuring out, okay, work is done, and now I can
Yeah.
enjoy myself, my wife, my family. How are you able to
Yeah.
do that? Because a lot of people have difficulty with turning work off, especially, I mean, one good step is turning off the news, not paying attention to the news, because
Yeah.
in some way that's eating away almost as bad as work would do.
So you said most people struggle, as do I, and as of this moment I do, because I love it so much,
Yeah.
and it can easily bleed over into all of that. So again, it just comes back to that awareness. When you're out of balance, you have to ask your questions as to why you are. And if the answer is you're doing it again, you're bringing work into your inner narrative and exuding the energy on your wife and your kids, you have to stop and also ask your wife to hold you accountable. So it's just constantly having that self-awareness narrative going on in your mind, plus your partner calling you out, which is difficult because of the subservient nature of Asian culture. They always say they will, but they don't always, which is just, but again, growth comes in that too, right? So
Thinking, Phil, of when you started your newspaper route, getting into work, you might have been a little nervous, or you might have been excited putting on that bag and delivering your first paper, thinking, oh, the
yeah.
world's going to end if I don't do it right, or getting into Moe's and doing well, or changing your career a couple times in the Middle East. Do you have a tip for people who are getting into work for the first time, or changing their career as you did, about the businesses just changing and getting out of something they're not really fond of, but into something they may love?
In hindsight, after now having a degree, which we could go off on a tangent, has
About
served
education.
me much in my life, um, is two things. Just be hungry for knowledge. Don't ever stop asking questions, or just ask questions. People hardly ask questions. And don't be afraid to look silly with the questions that you're asking, because there's potentially unlocks that people aren't asking. And in that can breed connection with others. And just really just be kind, because I was an ass early in my career. I was,
Me too.
and we all were, because you're just controlled by unconscious egoic states. Just be kind, and it'll just blossom in ways you can never possibly imagine.
Thinking back of not being as kind as, I mean, being the opposite of kind in my case for many, many years, is there something in your past that you've since learned, or a mistake that you made that you can let us know about, or let listeners know that here's a lesson I've learned based on being that person that I was, or that person who missed some insight that someone may have, like a mentor may have been shouting at the top of their lungs, but I just wasn't mature enough to listen to. But please listen to this and learn so you don't have to make that same mistake.
Yeah. Um, there's two things, and they go hand in hand. Just slow down and listen far more than you talk, which is very difficult for a personality like me. I thought I was always right, and I wanted to prove as to why I was right to everybody. And you miss moments. You miss moments where you can learn things, where you
Mm-hmm.
can connect with people, and those have been my biggest unlocks. Now, in meetings, I try and be the last to speak. Just watch and feel. Um, because there unlocks so much value in those moments.
Speaking of value, how has your idea of character, and you've had a great number of employment experiences and you would have
Yeah.
met lots of different people. Where do you throw character in the midst of a profession, a career?
Define character a bit more. Like you're speaking about their
Integrity.
values.
Yeah, their values, their integrity, and what they bring. I mean, a question that I used to kind of bring up is, where do you put character? Do you put it ahead of your career or not? Because a lot of people, and you would have met them in many
Yeah.
industries, it's career first, the title first. This is most important, and I might drag along my character connected to
Yeah.
a piece of string, but that is last, and me getting this job or making this money is most important. How have you learned that may not be the case, or is not?
Just it all links back to filing for bankruptcy in 2015 because I had identified and labeled myself with the money I had in my account. And I realized that has nothing to do with life because when all that goes away, all you have left is your character and all you have left is the relationships. So I once read, it's not your net worth, it's your network. And it's so true. So it's been flipped on its head
Mhm.
for me that if you lead with character and that is your predominant state, everything else will just naturally take care of itself. But surrendering to that is where it's quite challenging because the ego comes in and says, ah, but look at him and look at him, and you start seeing other options, but it's very temporary. It's not permanent, is what I've learned.
It's, yeah, I guess go to the tortoise and the hare. That the tortoise was wise
Yeah,
for going slow. I don't know if the quote is yours or not, but you have it on your social media. My desire to grow far exceeds my desire to defend my position. I wish I had that tattooed on my forehead as a kid, and I, I would like to have it at the forefront of my beak in life,
yeah,
because we always, where did you get that? We always kind of, I want to be right. You and I were speaking about this at the beginning, but
exactly.
wanting to be right, but rather wanting to grow. And as you just spoke about, being the last to speak, because you can learn so much rather than saying your position.
Yeah. So I got it from a guy that I follow online. There's 3 or 4 predominant thought leaders I follow online that I really resonate with. Curran Ray out of Australia. I don't know if you've heard of him. So he said it once in one of his content creations, and I was like, "Oh my God, that is like it just hit me, and it's my mantra now." So I do it in everything that I do in life. We are so terrified to ask people, how did I do there? How did I come across? The only thing that I can control is the perception of others. It
Hmm.
has nothing to do with me.
Hmm.
And if I reside in the place of, I've got it all figured out, you've lost
Yeah.
because you don't. You really don't. So getting those 360 feedback loops all day, every day, in any given moment resides so much growth potential if you just have that vulnerability to unlock that.
I think it's a great first step to take by asking other people, their perspective and what they perceive of you. We also have to warn that not all people are going to be right, but at least having that willingness to be
Yes,
open to feedback and criticism rather than thinking,
correct.
hey, I did a great
I'm
job.
right. Exactly.
I'm doing
But you bring
wonderful
up a
here.
great point because you should also listen to the feedback, meditate on it, or just think on it, feel it for yourself, because it may not also be accurate.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
you figure out these
Consider, yeah.
things the more that you practice it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Phil, I have just a few more questions for you, but do you have a goal in your work now? Is there something that you're hoping to attain with your new life perspective and the way that you're approaching things? Is there a goal, like a humble goal, that just something you'd like to see happen?
I would like to become the chief heart officer of our organization.
Very good. Is that a hard path to you're saying the chief heart?
Heart officer, yes.
Is that an actual position, or you're just saying you want to be the heart of the operation?
It's not. I would like to have it created.
Okay.
I think that all of us within us want to have an environment of a desire for growth over a desire to exceed your position. However, when you're in most corporations today, and I've had the luxury of being in quite a few of them at
Hmm.
very large scale, they know it's there, sea level, but don't quite know how to deal with it. And I would love to step in that gap and be the voice of influence for the people doing the actual work
Yeah.
and that higher level who could actually impact the influence and change.
That brings us into culture, right? And I don't think you hear culture, but it's only recently that I'm understanding culture is more than just this country and that country, right? It's the
100%.
whole atmosphere, the whole, the love or the what's the word? The working, the collaboration that people have in the company. And that
Yeah,
is the culture that you want to raise, you want to amplify, you want it to
yeah,
be sustaining, and you want it to be caring as well.
100%. So it's just creating an environment where people feel safe, truly safe. Because if you can do that, and that's no easy task, but it's possible because companies that do it on just people can be creative, innovative,
Mhm.
and the results have no maximum. And
Yeah.
the yeah,
Giving people the freedom to know that they're valued and there's a place for them as long as they want to contribute and they're putting their best effort forth. I think it's a great way,
yeah,
and I hope you get that position or create that position. Phil, is
yeah,
there any thinking of the difficulties along your path? Right? And you can have 2015 as a benchmark or a turning point, but most people, including yourself, we can look back. Every year has had difficulties. There's always up and down. Thinking of the listeners who are going through those highs and lows, and more so the lows, do you have any words of encouragement or any last bits of advice for them?
yes. Do not frame pain and struggle as a bad thing, and don't run from it. I love this from Tony Robbins. I figured out that life is happening for us, not to us. That is your biggest unlock. If you can remove ego from any situation and figure out why is this happening to me and what can I learn from it and grow from it, you're going to be an entirely different person.
Well, it's similar to I saw in your one of your posts you posted Mike Tyson's hot box of him just saying life we have to be conforming more to life, not getting life to conform to our ways, something along those lines. And
Yeah,
where we come up with most difficult or most
yeah,
difficulty is when we think, we are in control of all of this stuff. And if things are not going according to our plan, then life sucks. But life can be beautiful in the midst of the difficulties, because that's where, as you said in the beginning, where we do our growing.
100%. And I love that content from Tyson because here's the toughest man on the planet reduced to tears. And I'm
Yeah.
tearing up because we all live there, but we all put on these masks
Yeah.
to hide that. And it's not sustainable.
It goes to the, and I hear it a lot lately too, is I like Frankie McDonald call them bullies. The bullies on the internet are people who are ripping other people down, and it's because their lives are miserable. It doesn't mean our lives are not miserable, but if someone's willing to go out there and rip somebody down, then their life has to be miserable too. And
Yeah,
it takes some maturity on our part to, I saw someone else who was challenged by a bunch of kids to a fight, and it takes maturity not to, flex your muscle, flex, to show that you're the stronger one, because there's no need to prove it. But
no,
we have a responsibility to be mature in these situations and know that life is going to hit us,
yeah,
and sometimes turning that cheek is the best way to move forward, and knowing that that had happened, we can
yeah.
learn our best lessons.
And because I just got say it to add on what you just had asked, and I have really learned this just through hard work, and it's always hard work even now, and will always be until we die. The only thing that we can control in life is how we respond to things. That's
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever happens, if someone cuts you off in a car, you can't control it. It cannot happen again, but you can control how you respond to that. Either pissed off or say, you know what, he may be in a rush or he may be having a bad day. I don't know. But I mean, there's much growth and peace in that, right? If you can
Yeah.
do that more and more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the essence of my desire to grow far exceeds my desire to defend myself. Phil, how
Sure.
can
Yeah.
people get in touch with you or contact you however you wish?
This is my email, philip@philipridgway.com. But I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I'm not quite active as BrianVee would like,
Mm-hmm.
but I will be eventually. But yeah, there's your mediums.
Phil, one final question for you, and that is, why do you work?
Why do I work? It's a great question, Brian. For me, it's no longer about the money, although it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I work because it's the vehicle that allows me to grow in the areas which I've explained over this podcast.
Yeah.
So it's just a vehicle um, to allow me to exercise those muscles to grow as a person, personally and professionally.
Philip Ridgway, consultant in the shipping industry, man who's on a mission. Positivity is his vision. And I've greatly appreciated this conversation with you today, Phil.
Me too. Thanks, man.